everybody. Mike Westfall here at McDonald Garden Center. And of course, if you don't know, you will soon know. This is Eddie Anderson, Mr. Anderson to me. And as you can see here to the image to my right, it's Eddie Anderson Appreciation Week here at McDonald Garden Center. And today we're going to be talking about container gardening with Mr. Anderson. But before we get started, in appreciation, I just wanted to say thank you for everything that you've done for me. He's been a mentor, a teacher, my boss, the person who gives me a paycheck every week. So we've had a great relationship, and the reason that I've been here almost 20 years now is mainly because of this man right here. So thank you, I appreciate you, and I know the community appreciates you as well.
Hey Mike, we appreciate you. You've been a very good student here and brought a lot of enthusiasm to McDonald Garden Center. We appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And so, not to elaborate too much on that, because Eddie would not be one to sit there and talk about himself or boast too much, for sure. He is all about plants, and that's what we're going to talk about today is plants. So welcome everybody to this live webinar where we're going to talk about container gardening. As always, please feel free to ask questions throughout this webinar. I'll be monitoring your questions. You'll probably have lots of them. That's perfectly fine. Ask questions. We hope to get you inspired and get you going on your journey to creating some gorgeous containers. And really that's what we want to talk about is getting inspired. And I'm really going to try and let Mr. Anderson talk a lot. I do tend to talk way too much. But I'm going to let him talk a lot because inspiration is a word that I don't know that I really used a whole lot in my life or even early on in gardening. But once I started working here, it was one of his favorite words that he always taught me was inspiration. What we do here at the Garden Center to inspire you, but also just inspiration in general. And that's what we're here to do today is show you all of these images that he's collected from his containers. And so I'll let him talk a little bit about inspiration from his using his words.
Well, I find early in the morning when you walk out and you see all these plants performing well, that's inspiring for the day. It gets you excited to see all this beauty, smell the fragrance.
Yep.
It's a lot of fun to do those things.
Yep. And these containers right here are just a small sampling of what we're going to go through today. And so instead of creating something, we did create a couple containers the other day. Maybe you saw that on our live, but we'll show those here in a little bit. We'll move some things around. We'll be doing a lot of different things here. But really, the inspiration is what I think you get from seeing creative pieces. I mean, I love going to, arboretums or to botanical gardens and seeing some of these specimens that have been growing for years, hundreds of years sometimes, and you get to really see the impact and the value that you get. And by seeing some of your creations that you're growing in your own yard is really inspiring.
Mike, I think when you keep a plant for several years, then you really get to appreciate it. It takes a little more skill to do that,
Yep.
But boy, the rewards of having a plant with some age and some real structure to it, it's got to be very rewarding to the person that can grow those things long term.
Yeah, and so that's what we're going to talk about today. So again, Deborah, hello. So please let us know where you're watching from. Please ask questions as we go through this. The first question that I think a lot of us have, I know that when one of the first things I did was I bought a Japanese maple. I grew it in a pot because I didn't know where I was going to be maybe 2 years from that, where I was living. And a lot of us are in situations where maybe we don't have yards. And so let's talk a little bit about what you think, why you might grow in a container. Pros, cons.
Oh, there's lots of reasons. One of the big things, I have a mature garden now. The trees are bigger, so my beds have got a lot of competition, and I can't grow the annuals and the color items that I used to be able to grow with all that competition. So by going to containers, I eliminate the challenge of the plant getting enough nutrients or enough moisture in that competitive environment. So containers really do a great job there.
Yeah.
I also like, you bring in some colorful pots and things, and they become a piece of art and landscape as well as the plants that you're growing. And, most of us, by the end of the season, the plant is flagging a little, but I just remove everything, and I either pot it with pansies or I leave it alone, just empty, because it can be a beauty in empty pots there that have got color and are become a focal point through the winter scene. So another advantage of growing in containers. Sometimes you're having a special event in the garden, and when that happens, like a party in the evening or you're having guests over or something, it's easy to rearrange containers and get your color where you want it. I do grow some perennials, and I find that perennials have a shorter window of really beauty, and then they rest for a little while, so you don't get that constant flowering that you can get with annuals. And by having containers, I can move that aside. I'm thinking of a lavender plant that puts on a beautiful show for maybe 6 weeks, and the fragrance that lavender flowering will bring into the garden is wonderful. But then it's time to shear it back, and it's not as attractive right after you shear it. So I move that plant away and I bring another plant into its place. Great advantage for container gardening.
I love the versatility of container gardening. It's kind of one of the first things I think about when spring hits is, oh, let me get my containers and plant them up. And as Mr. Anderson just said, the transition time of when you might be growing your pansies and taking them out, and it allows you to fluctuate throughout the year and continue gardening in millions and millions of different ways. I mean, I think a lot of times we always talk about combo containers, and we did a couple, and we'll show you that, and he's got a lot of images we're going to show you as well. But it doesn't always have to be that. It can be hundreds of different possibilities, and we're going to try and cover the wide gamut of that, but I love growing in containers because of that.
You know, Mike, I talked about being out early in the morning, and it's a relaxing thing for me. And as I'm walking around and observing the containers, it's easy when the plant is up closer to waist level or so, it's easy to groom that plant at that point. And that's an opportunity to sit there and study the plant and look at it. How does it perform? Are there some flowers on there that are fading, and I can deadhead those? Removing the old flowers is a wonderful thing. That does two things. It pinches the plant back, brings that stem shorter, and that anytime you cut or remove foliage, it causes branching, so that causes the plant to get thicker. It also allows the plant to put more energy into flowering and less into going to seed, and which is the real mission of the plant, is to reproduce itself. But we want the flowers, so pinching it back will stimulate it. Yeah. So grooming is much easier in containers than it is out in flower beds.
And that's a perfect segue into what we're going to do first, and we're going to try and keep this as short and sweet as we possibly can, because both Mr. Anderson and myself could talk about probably one of these subjects for hours. But we're going to try and keep it short and sweet. What do you need for container gardening? I mean, so this is just the basics. We need plants. So you can see that image of we just got plants, and we've got lots of plants surrounding us. That's what we're in. This is the plant business. You also need containers, and you need a good soil. So we're going to put you on full screen here so we can show you some of these things. And let's talk first about the soil. Let's make a little bit of a mess here real quick.
Yeah.
Of course, we're going to recommend our McDonald potting soil. But I've got an open bag here so I can kind of show you and let Mr. Anderson kind of talk to you about the benefits of a good potting soil.
The first thing with potting soil is that it's got to drain. You've got a closed container there that can hold moisture in there, and if it doesn't drain well, then you get root rot setting into those small fibrous roots in there. And that root rot is a real problem. So you need a soil like this that will let the water flow through, bring the air back in, it moistens the fibers of the soil, but air is coming in at the same time. And that's what creates a healthy root system. So really, this is a mixture of peat moss, which has great moisture holding capacity and nutrient exchange surfaces that work well. So you get the organic matter from peat moss as it disintegrates over maybe a 3-year period or so. There's also a lot of bark. Now, we use a lot of bark because the bark is readily available here in Virginia. We've got plenty of pine trees, and we're making a lot of paper and other products with our trees, But then the bark is a surplus. You take the bark and it's composted. It has to decay and break down so that there's no disease being carried in it or anything. It goes through the heating process that sterilizes it. And this takes up to a year to compost that bark to get it right.
Right.
And then we've got some perlite in here, which is a good old North Carolina rock. Just expanded rock is all it is. It's a natural product, and it has got great surfaces for exchange of nutrients, and it's lightweight, so it drains well. So that's really the basic ingredients.
Yeah.
Now there is, occasionally you'll see a little green pill in there. It's a little bit of nutrient so that when you first pot something up, it's got a little charge of fertilizer in there to get it going.
Yeah.
But that's one of the big keys is fertilizer when you're doing the potting soil.
Yep.
You've got to feed these things.
And we're going to talk about that in just a second. We do have a question though. Amy asked, don't you need perlite and different soil mixtures for different plants?
Yes, to some degree. I tend to use this probably just for almost everything. When I get into succulent containers, I'll put maybe as much as 25% sand in here. Outside of that, for most of the general things that I'm growing, if you were in a bonsai situation, you would want more grit in here, so a bigger surface that will drain better, because that intensive form of agriculture requires a little bit better drainage. Then you also have got some things that might have special requirements, but they're fewer and far between for most of the things that we're growing.
Yeah.
If you were trying to do peonies, you might want to go a little more alkaline or something like that. But for the most part, I'll just stick with the regular potting soil. And we'll look at some things here that
all-purpose potting soil, hence the name, keeps it simple, keeps it easy. We do carry some small bags of African violet, bonsai, cactus, and succulent mixes. So if you wanted to ever play with those, yes, we do carry those. But you can always amend your own and make it certain different things. Like he mentioned, adding sand or adding rock or grit when you're doing bonsai. But this is a great all-purpose potting soil that you can use for really anything. It's a great thing to kind of stock up on. We've always got a great deal on it, so that's why I always like to mention the buy two, get one free deal, because if you're going to buy two, you might as well get your third one for free and stock up and hold it, and it lasts a very long time. So, I always have a couple bags laying around because you just never know what kind of products you're going to get into, and this is a good one that you always feel safe getting into your containers. So that leads us to containers, and there's a lot of different types of materials of containers. Let's start with plastic. Plastic is right underneath you. Plastic, I think we all know, is less expensive, but what are some of the benefits of plastic?
Well, that inexpensive, it really is a big benefit. A lot of people like the lightweight because it's easy to carry around or move. The challenge with lightweight is that the wind blows it over. And once a plant blows over, it's more trouble. It always seems like that it's that thunderstorm that comes through and it knocks the plant over just as it was about to get that health-giving, wonderful rain that comes. And you can use a water hose all you want to, but there's nothing like rainwater to invigorate the plants.
That's a garden center expert by any means. I think if anybody ever works in a garden center, there's nothing worse than, a rainstorm's coming, I don't have to water, and then all your plants fall, you gotta go water anyways.
Yeah.
But plastic is a good one. It's very, they're pretty durable these days. It's a great lightweight option. If you're in a protected area, it's a good option. You can try putting rock down on the bottom, which might help add some weight. But that is a major benefit, is the inexpensive nature of it, but the con would be that they blow over a little bit. So let's look at ceramics. So ceramics are a little bit heavier. So here's just a nice big one that I grabbed. Just talk about ceramics for a minute.
Well, I grow most of the plants I grow. I try to use the ceramic because of that wind factor. I get a lot of breezes blowing through my patio area, and it's a shame when you've worked hard to get a nice specimen up here and some of these plants that provide some height in the container, and then it blows over. That's a real damage. You do like the higher fired pots. These are frost resistant. That's really says that I can expect to get 4 or 5 years out of this before there's any significant deterioration. I've got a couple of big pots that were really very nice pots, and they've shaled a section or two here, and I've lost the glaze off of it, but it's still attractive, it's still functioning after about 10 years, but it's time for me to change. I also find that my taste in colors have changed now. so I'm ready to change.
Yep.
I want a different color down there.
And you can always get a little bit more longevity out of these ceramic containers. They come in so many vibrant colors. A tip that he taught me a long time ago was to keep them off the ground a little bit. You know, it helps with the drainage, so you know your drain hole's not going to get clogged. I love to scatter containers throughout my landscape. I know you do, because he's got a lot of them, and he's got nowhere else to put them. So if you're on a deck or porch or patio, it's okay to just drop it right on the deck. But having your drain hole cleared is a great thing. But also, it keeps it off the ground and keeps the soil from underneath from wicking moisture into it and allowing it to freeze. And I think it kind of sets it apart. I mean, I remember Mr. Anderson and I building little brick pads and little brick towers for every little container in the garden center. So it's a great thing. It sets it apart, but it also keeps it going a little bit longer.
Yeah.
All right, so next one would be, for sure, if I've got it, be Terracotta. Of course, we all know Terracotta. What do you think about Terracotta?
Oh, Terracotta is the original pot, I guess. It's porous, it breathes nicely, so your air exchange is improved a little bit over plastic or the sealed type containers. So good old clay pots are hard to beat. The problem is that clay is a little lower firing, so it's not as dense, and when it rains during the winter time, the moisture gets into those little porous areas, and then it freezes at night, and that's what creates the flaking off or breaking of the containers. And that's the downside of clay, is if you're trying to leave it out all winter. I've got some very nice high-fired clay pots that have lasted for, gosh, they've been out there 6 or 8 years now, and they're still looking good. Some of them have deteriorated, but others have made it fine. It's funny, it's just a little change in the microclimate around the patio there can make all the difference in how long it lasts.
Yeah, and I love Terracotta because it just kind of, it always, I think it mixes with every decor. It looks good.
It's the classic look.
Yeah, I mean, you can use it inside, you can use it outside. It's super great. I mean, it's pretty inexpensive, really, as far as containers go. And it's just very versatile. You can grow anything in it, so it's a great option. Let's see. I did see we had a question there about, which was a very, very good question. Carolyn said, if a pot does not have a drainage hole, what do you put in the bottom of the pot to prevent the soil from becoming waterlogged?
Oh, I try to avoid pots like that. It's a no-win situation if you're keeping it outside. If you're inside, it's just careful watering. If you overwater it and get it waterlogged in there, you're probably going to lose the plant. Yeah. So you've got to really underwater it sparingly and probably a little more frequently, because you're walking right on the edge there of keeping that plant alive. You can do it, but better to have a saucer under there and a relief valve for that extra moisture. If you happen to get it overwatered, turn it on its side for a few hours and let some of that water drain off, and maybe you'll make it okay.
Yeah. And another great option, Carolyn, is if you love your pot, you got to use it, and you're like, I got to have it, then grow in a plastic pot and slip it into your decorative
Good
pot.
Solution, Mike.
So there you go. You got your good drainage in your plastic pot. You can get some grower pots. You can get just a regular terracotta colored plastic pot like this. Now this one doesn't fit quite perfectly inside, but it's a great way. I think a lot of people do that indoors.
Yeah.
With their indoor plants. A lot of our indoor pottery doesn't have holes in it. They're really designed as a what would you call like a pot cover. I mean, that's really what they are, is a slip in, and it allows you to upgrade into a smaller or bigger plastic pot as you divide or as you grow bigger, and then you can transfer them into different pots. So I have a collection of ceramic pots that don't have drainage holes in them. So Carolyn, I know what you're dealing with. Get some plastic pots, have a little stack of them in your backyard. I know he's got a stack for sure, because they always come in handy. And of course, if you're growing inside, you can control the watering a little bit better. That's really the biggest issue there, Carolyn. Amy said, I dislike clay pots, but I'm okay with pots. Clay takes a little bit of the moisture away. That's a good point. So I mean, water holding capacity is a good point to make there when you're talking about containers. I know ceramic and plastic, you don't deal with as much of the wind taking the moisture away, but clay does.
Yeah, clay will wick the water out of the container, so you've got to water a little more frequently.
Yep, good point.
Yep.
Let's see, let's just go through some questions. What about using core pot liners, pros and cons? So I think maybe what she's talking about there is, there are cocoa cores, so like for a hanging basket, that's probably what she's talking about.
Yeah, that fiber is wonderful because it does breathe, and you can grow very good plants in that environment where you've got that coir liner, and the cocoa fiber is a byproduct of palm trees, growing palm trees, and you've got the coconut husk, and I think that's the #1 fiber in the world. It's a huge amount of production. So it's really a waste product in many, many parts of the world, and we've learned how to grow and use it effectively. So it's ground up into fine particles, and it's a great organic substitute in potting soils. It can be woven into fibers and mats that you use at your front door, but it can also make a nice liner so that you've got a good growing container there.
Yeah, and you're seeing more of these fabric pots being used, and those are kind of interesting as well. And it's all of this idea of, the air getting into the root system, which a lot of us probably try to fight maybe sometimes, and we say, well, I don't want a lot of air. Well, air is good. That's why we mentioned the perlite in your potting soil. You need to get air down to the root system. And with those fabric containers and your cocoa core, containers and liners, they're probably going to dry out a little bit faster, but it's just like you mentioned earlier with pruning, which we're going to talk about a little bit more. Pruning on the top encourages more growth.
Yep.
Pruning a root system does the same thing. And so a lot of people with vegetable gardening, which we'll maybe get into a little bit, want to not prune the top of their plant because that's where they're getting the fruit from. So if you can prune the root system and let the air prune the root system, it's a really interesting thing. And we carry a whole line of smart pots, which is a cool way of doing that. But the cocoa core is a great option as well, especially a little bit more decorative too.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. I think some people were helping out with some of the questions. Mentioned a diamond tip drill bit to drill a hole in your ceramic pot. That's definitely an option. If it's something that's a keepsake to you, just be careful. I like the plastic pot insert because you don't have to worry about breaking if you don't get the hole drilled perfectly right. All right, let's see. Do we have one more? One more question was, I want to put my fruit trees in a container. Please advise. You got any suggestions for fruit trees in containers?
Get large pots. I grow citrus. My citrus are probably 4 feet tall. I've got one big one that's about 7 or 8 feet tall. I've got it in a big pot, maybe 18-inch diameter, and that really works well. You want dwarf fruit. I think about raspberries are a great solution. The dwarf raspberries really do well in a container and can be productive. You go out and pick a few raspberries, and it doesn't take many of them to give you a lot of flavor. They've really got quite a good flavor. So yes, fruit, but definitely dwarf fruit. There's more and more activity in developing the dwarf varieties that will work well. We've got blueberries now that are fabulous, that are very compact dwarf plants. There's lots of species of blueberries, and I've tried about 6 of them now. They're all delicious fruits, and So you can do well that way.
That's a great idea. Is instead of the trees, maybe consider some of the smaller bushes like the raspberries, blackberries, the blueberries. Great option. Strawberries are really, an easy kind of quick crop to grow as well.
There's a dwarf fig now,
Yep.
Little Miss Figgy, that is more compact. You're still going to need a big root system, and you're going to water it frequently because figs love moisture. I mean, they want to drink every day.
All right, so let's see. Let's go. That brings us really to the next question: is maintenance of our containers. So we're going to kind of briefly go through some of these tips real quick. Of course, we're going to have to water our containers. We're going to have to feed our plants in containers, and we're probably going to have to do a little bit of pruning and maintenance on our containers. So let's knock out fertilizer first. So when we're feeding our plants in containers, of course, they've got drain holes, hopefully, and the water's draining out, but also what's draining out those holes?
Your fertilizer.
Right.
Because fertilizer is soluble in water, so it dissolves and it flows through. And when you overwater a pot and you see the water running out of that drain hole in the bottom, that's carrying your fertilizer away. So you've got to have some way of constantly introducing new fertilizer into the soil.
And I think he's very similar to me. I mean, I think he's the one that designed this guy right here, or helped design it. So green leaf is a great one. We've got great options for feeding. I think granular foods are my personal favorite because of the longevity. I don't have to think about it as much. What's your thought? Let's say granular versus liquid.
Growers use water-soluble fertilizers. Now, the reason for that is you get great control. It's easy to over-fertilize, and if you do that, you need to back off and back off quickly. With water-soluble fertilizers, you can do that. You've got 7 days of shelf life there, and that's about it. It's over with. It's done. You got to reapply the things like Miracle Grow or any of the water-solubles. So you need a slow-release kind of fertilizer is what I tend to use. Personally, I use a lot of Osmocote, like this one here. This is a 6-month release Osmocote. And so this is those little pills that a lot of people call the insect eggs. We don't hear that as much anymore. Our consumers are really getting very educated about things like this. But the Osmocote has a slow release, 6 month. So I can put it in now. I do most of my container gardening in May and the 1st of June. So I put that in and I'm good into October and November. You don't get a steady, uniform fertilization. You still get a curve out of it.
Right.
You get a peak of performance, but that peak tends to be right when the plant is reaching its maturity and full blown and has the greatest demand for fertilizer. With this product, probably 3 months from now, 3 months from application is when you're going to hit the peak of fertilization. And then it's going to taper off as we go into the fall season.
Yeah.
So I can't say enough about using fertilizer. It is very important to be successful with containers. I see a world of hanging baskets that people are using, and they're fabulous. But that was in most cases, that was grown with water-soluble fertilizer in our production ranges. So once you get it, it's going to need fertilizer in about 7 days. And you can apply green leaf, you can apply Osmocote, but a good slow-release fertilizer is an important thing.
Yeah.
For success with containers.
I agree. And of course, organics have come a long way over the past 10 to 15 years for sure. I mean, definitely in my lifetime here at the Garden Center, it was almost, unheard of to have much organic going on, but then all of a sudden it erupted, and this development and the idea of the mycorrhizae and beneficial bacteria, and Biotone is one of the best suppliers of those beneficial bacteria and mycorrhizae. You got to get them right to the soil, or you got to get them right to the root system. So you can sprinkle it on top, it'll work some of them down, but you really want to get them right to the root system, and they basically attach themselves to the root system of the plant and form a symbiotic relationship where they transfer different materials back and forth, things that the plants don't need, things that the mycorrhizae don't need, and they're just transferring these back and forth, and it's a great relationship.
So when you've got this mycorrhizae introduced in the soil, a root going out has the potential to collect, let's say, in a day it can collect a pint of water. When you've got mycorrhiza introduced into that soil, they attach to that root and they expand out. And they can increase the water holding or the water gathering capability by as much as 10 times. So the plant becomes a lot more efficient. It doesn't have to work as hard to get the moisture into the cell tissue and up where it does the good in the foliage of the plant.
Yeah. So these are great. And of course, we carry tons and tons of different types of plant foods, liquids. Liquids have their place too. Of course, I mean, I know you like the chelated liquid iron, which is, you know, a specific one. It's a specific nutrient, but they have their place and they have their time. And a lot of us may find ourselves in the need of a quick boost. And so sometimes those come in handy. So
the iron is very effective for many plants during the heat of the summer when it's hard for them to utilize all the nitrogen. The iron assists in making the nitrogen more available. But I mentioned my citrus, and the citrus has a high demand for iron to make that fruit good. So I supplement with about 3 feedings of iron throughout the growing season, and that's my main use for iron.
So the next thing that, of course, we wanted to talk about is watering. Watering is super, super important. I always love to mention the things that we use here at the Garden Center every single day. And this is our #1 tool. You'll see it on the end of every single hose here at the Garden Center. And we finally gave up on pretty much selling any other kind of watering tool. Of course, we sell watering cans, hoses, lots of different things. But this is the only one that we really sell because we use it every day. And trust us, if we're watering our plants every single day and you're watering just a few, look at the experts and see what they're using. And this is what we've been using.
Mike, Mr. Graham invented this many years ago, and it was a wonderful invention. What he realized was that most types of hose fittings, are sometimes called a rose, have a pressure release as the water comes out. So you hit your container soil and splash, the soil is bouncing everywhere, and it's too much pressure. So getting a breaker, a water breaker on the end of your hose that distributes a more gentle stream so that you're not washing the soil out of your containers is very important. So there's the trick. I mean, it's so simple, and yet the the magic of what that does. And there are a few others that might get close, but for the money, I can't find anything else that works. I mean, that's got it.
They're $24.99. I mean, you can't beat it. And it's all about the reach, too. It really saves your back. You can go right into a container, so it's really easy to get right to the source. And I think, you know, there's different times that you can water. We always are going to recommend watering in the morning rather than the evening. Dampness and darkness cause fungus. And what part of the plant takes up water? I mean, I know some leaves take up moisture, but really it's the root system.
Yeah.
And so we don't want you to water the leaves. You know, I remember him my first day watering. I'm sure I was doing this whole like, let me just spray it over everything. And he quickly came up and said, let me show you how to do this correctly. And water the plant, water the root system. And when we're watering containers are going to dry out faster. Hanging baskets, pots, they're just naturally, they're above ground. They're going to catch more evaporation, they're going to catch more wind, and they're going to dry out faster. And so water the root system, water directly into the soil, save your back some backache, and reach those high places, reach those low places. With this guy, it's the best tool out there.
You know, the only solution that I've got that's better than that is to run a drip line out and put little drippers into the individual pots. I have wanted to do that many times. I've thought about doing it, and I've never done it. I enjoy using the water hose because it puts me in touch with the plants. I'm out there early in the morning because that's by far the best time to water. Just as the sun's coming up and the plant has a high demand for water then, it's growing, it's energized and ready to go for the day, and you get that water on there and away it goes. But using that hose and walking around, I see every plant, I observe what's going on with it, and I can stay in touch with just how that plant is performing. So I don't mind watering. In fact, I find it a therapy.
Right.
But the drip hoses are really another answer that you can use to. But I grow too many pots, and I want to move them around all the time, so it just doesn't work for me.
And for most of us that are maybe growing maybe just 5 or 10 things in containers, a simple watering one is going to be perfectly fine for you. And let's talk real quickly about pruning and basically the tool. I mean, you all need a pair of pruners. Here's my original Felcos that Mr. Anderson convinced me to get as he pulled out his old pair that I'm sure he still has. And
I still have it.
Yep. So these I think are going on probably 15 years. I probably should sharpen them. I know you've sharpened yours a couple times. But man, they are so great and it's worth the money. So for our avid gardeners that are out there that garden all the time, a pair of Felcos is going to save you a ton. Now, if you're somebody that maybe leaves them around the yard and isn't very good about taking care of them, don't worry, we got you covered too. Just an inexpensive pair of bypass pruners. That's what you need to get the job done. If you lose them, you can always buy a new pair. So if you're not as good about protecting them and keeping them safe and near and dear to your heart, like we are, then get yourself a pair of inexpensive ones. But we've got lots of different types too.
I like these little ones.
Yep.
When you're dealing with small plants and you want to get in close to the plant and be able to prune back in here these little flowers or stems, then the small pruners are really handy and fun to use. Yeah. And I always grab the little ones when I'm going out to collect herbs when I'm cooking. You know, it's just a quick, easy.
Right.
There's something about those little ones that are fun to use from time to time.
And speaking of herbs, these are really cool. You grab these.
I
know you love these, so I'll let you talk about these a little bit.
Well, a few years ago, I started growing herbs in containers near my patio so that they were always there, even through the wintertime. I can run out there real quick, snip off a few branches and go in, and then I've got to chop up that foliage to use in my favorite soups or whatever I'm doing. So these scissors, if we get them very close, you can see that they've got multiple blades there.
I think it's basically 5 pairs of scissors in one.
Yes, so every time you snip, you're shredding that leaf up. So I take a leaf and I cut it this way and then I cut it this way, and I've got a whole lot of little pieces. Yep. They work in my soup wonderfully well. You never even know they're in there, except you get the flavor.
Yep, exactly. So those are great tips. And, as you mentioned earlier, pruning is something that, one, is a necessity to, or not a necessity, you don't have to, but if you prune, you actually get bigger, better plants. And by deadheading and taking off those spent flowers, you force that plant to produce more blooms, which is why we grow them. So there's a lot. I mean, again, we could talk about pruning for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. But we'll keep it short and simple and say, get yourself a nice pair of pruners, get yourself a cheap pair, get yourself some herb scissors. I think we've probably got 40 different types of pruning shears right now, bonsai shears, houseplant shears. I mean, you name it, we've got you covered. So if you're looking for something to use around the garden, definitely come and check us out for those as well. All right, so I know we got a couple questions. We'll take care of a little bit of business before we really get into the meat of the subject here. I know somebody had mentioned a vegetable garden. She's got sandy soil. We're going to get to that. We're going to try to at least. Yeah. So definitely, Faye, stick around, and we'll get to your question here towards the end when we talk a little bit more about herbs and vegetables in containers, because I know that's what you're after. Corey said, can you plant a dogwood in a huge pot? It'd have to be a pretty big pot, right?
Yeah, again, you've got to go up, and you're going to get maybe 5-6 years, and then you've got to be looking for a place in the ground, or just say, hey, I'm going to donate this to a local school or someplace where they have got the space and could put it in the ground. Many of the parks are happy to take a nice, well-grown tree like that. And then you start over again. So you start with a 1 gallon or sometimes even seed. I've grown a number of trees from seed, and I enjoy that. It's a lot of fun. You don't get some of the neat name varieties that are out now. I mean, some of the hybrid red buds that are on the market are just fabulous. So to get one of those and grow it in a container would be a lot of fun. and well worthwhile for maybe 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
Then I think you're looking for a home for it.
Yeah.
Unless you want to learn the skills and techniques of bonsai, and there, we've seen giant trees that are grown in very small containers. That's a special art. I joined the Bonsai Society and learned that. The most intensive form of agriculture I know of is growing a bonsai. But you learn a huge amount about how to really care for a plant by doing that.
Yeah. And I grew, the first plant that I ever bought here was a Shishigashira Japanese maple. Planted it in a pot, grew it in a pot for 15 years. Now that's a specimen that I can grow in a small container, and I was able to keep it small. And but once I bought my house that hopefully I'll be in for a while, I had to plant it. So it's a good point. Grow a tree in a container for a long time, for 5-6 years, but know that the end game is that it's going to be, it needs to get into the ground eventually. If that's something that you're thinking about, maybe you're thinking about moving in the future, it's a great opportunity to grow in a container, and then when you move, you can plant it in the ground.
But one of the points to make about that, if you're growing a tree in the container, one of the struggles that we have all the time with containers is that a tree is going to send its roots down and then it starts wrapping around. So this wrapping around is a real problem. As the tree matures and the trunk gets up, let's say that the trunk's up about 10 or 12 inches in diameter.
Yep.
At that point, that root is still sitting down here in that circle.
Yep.
And that circle actually strangles that tree. And many a time we've seen big trees grow up and they've got a nice head up there, and then all of a sudden a windstorm comes up and it topples over. And that's that strangulation that occurred just below the surface. So when you take it out of the container, you want to be sure that you snip those roots, those encircling roots. That'll cause the ends of the root to explode and make a very fibrous root system, which is what you need in a container. And then you have stopped that girdling, we call it, or strangulation of the tree.
Yeah. A lot of times you see that where you plant a tree, you never tease the roots, you never kind of got them loose, you never got them thinking they were outside of a pot, and then years down the road, the tree thinks it's still in a pot and it's been wrapping in the soil. So if we can have it in the soil, if we don't let it know it's hit a new space for it to grow into. But if you're growing something in a container for a long time, definitely very, very good advice. Our marketing team has ruined the secret. It's Mr. Anderson's birthday. So we'll take a minute and we'll mention everybody's names that said happy birthday to you, because it's a long list here. So Katie said happy birthday, Amy, Diane, Carolyn, Faye, Corey, let's see, the list goes on and on. Deborah said happy birthday. So, all right, so now we're getting back into
this is the biggest birthday I've ever had, because in the plant business, you're out taking care of the plants on March 31st, and there's never time to have a party like this. So thank you very much.
I told him we had to put him back to work one more time on his birthday. I'm sure he's worked almost all of his birthdays. Been in the business a long time. But everybody, thank you for the happy birthday wishes to Mr. Anderson. Happy birthday, Mr. Anderson. All right, let's get into really what we're here to talk about is some of Mr. Anderson's amazing containers. So these are some great images. So we'll go through basically a slideshow. I mean, we could sit here and plant up 100 containers for you, but nothing's going to show you something magic like this quarter-line container here that he's been growing in his backyard for maybe years, maybe months. So we'll let him talk about all his different containers.
Well, this one is on its third year now. The quarter line didn't make it. It freezes to the ground, and sometimes I just pull it out. Sometimes it'll come back. I had one that was very successful last year, but most of the time that plant won't grow until it really gets hot, and then it just never achieves what it can be when you start with a larger plant like you see here. So this container, the begonias, this is the third year on those begonias now, and they between seeding themselves everywhere and the original plants coming up from the rootstock, they may not make it this year. I haven't looked yet, because that 20 degrees that we had probably took those roots out. And then the verbena makes a great fall, or spiller as we tend to call. Mike always likes to give us the pitch about
the filler, spiller, thriller.
There you go.
So we'll definitely talk about that.
Tongue twister.
But so what do you do with your containers in the winter? Do you leave them outside?
No. Well, two things. Some I just empty because I have a lot of containers, and so I just clean them off and try to hide them. But many of them I'll plant with pansies. I counted this morning, I think I've got about a dozen pots of pansies sitting around, and then some of the beds are planted with pansies, because that makes the perfect cycle. I love that cycle of planting the pansies in November. Once it's cooled down, the pansies will flower in a protected location up on my patio close to the house. They'll bloom all winter long. I constantly have flowers. They're right there where I sit in the family room, and I look out the window, and I'm looking at those smiling faces all winter. And then in the spring, they flush out and get full and thick, and you get this abundance of flowers and that wonderful pansy fragrance that permeates the whole back patio area in the whole month of April, just as you're wanting to rush out there and sit and enjoy a nice warm evening. Those pansies are filling the air with fragrance. So they do fade out as it gets hot in May, and so at that point it's time to change out. Fits the perfect cycle then, because we have to get to May when the weather is warm before the tropical plants and the what I call warm season annuals really are coming in and performing well. Things like vinca, you can't grow vinca in April around here. You've got to wait till May. And so there's a number there. Lantana is another one. Much as I love lantana, you've got to wait until May before you plant it.
Yeah, it's a great cycle there with the pansies to the summer.
Yep.
But doesn't mean that you can't have a different cycle. You can build your own cycle. I mean, it could be, a lot of people are planting containers now. We planted some because some people might not grow pansies in the winter. And so when spring hits, they're excited to get outside and plant something up. And so there's 100 different cycles you can have. That's a great one. I'm sure he does some planting now soon. And then he'll have a constant cycle of different types of planters running. These cordyline are absolutely gorgeous. Here's another one that is stunning.
Yeah, when I first started gardening where I live now, and I've been there for about 40 years, it was all sunshine. That's all I had was sunshine. And I planted a lot of trees and designed it so that my patio area would be shady during the summertime, and I've got that shade now. Along with that comes the problem of I can no longer grow those wonderful sun-loving annuals and perennials that put on that wonderful color show. So I'm constantly searching for things that give me a wonderful summer performance in a shady situation. So begonias are a backbone of it, but the tropical foliages, this cordyline here called exotica is fabulous for that pink and cream colored foliage that comes there. And as we get into the heat of the summer, it just gets better and better and better. So by September and October, you've got a real showpiece there. Yeah. And the begonias match up the color perfectly. I like lime green with it, so I'm always looking for lime green foliages, and there's no shortage of that these days. There's plenty of things with lime green coloring.
Yeah, and that's just a perfect play there of taking that maybe not so subtle in that exotica cordyline, but there's a lot of pink in there, and so you can see it and you can match it up. But finding a subtle color, matching it up, and then throwing in a contrast color, it's just a stunning combination. Yeah. And then here's another one with the cordyline.
Yeah, this one's got cordyline, and I think we're going to see another picture here. The spiller at the bottom there is a plant called Rousselia, and in a few minutes we'll see another picture of Rousselia in full bloom. It does cycle. It's not in bloom constantly, but every time it flowers, I can assure you the hummingbirds will be there.
Yeah. Gorgeous, gorgeous container. So, a couple quick questions that we can get to, and then we'll kind of talk a little bit more about this thriller, spiller, filler idea. I think I saw a question. Well, I saw somebody mention, Cheryl mentioned she's in zone 4, so she's up north somewhere.
Oh boy!
So Cheryl definitely can't do as much as we might be able to do down here in the south, but she's still got options, I'm sure. Amy said, "Don't we need to wait to keep plants outside because the final frost isn't here yet?" Good point.
Oh yeah, we just went through a blistering cold with temperatures of 20. I think I got to 27. Which certainly is freezing most things. My strawberry crop is sitting there in full bloom now. Fortunately, I had enough cloth to get out there and cover those, and I think they made it through. But we're in danger of frost, depending on where you're located, on up to even the 15th of April. We get up to Williamsburg, and you might be the 30th of April. Yeah. So the further you get from the water, the more risk there is of a late frost coming in. Yeah. The water acts as a buffer, so if you're close to the water, that water temperature, even if it's cold to the touch, it's still holding enough warmth so that an area there. And then you've got microclimates, like up close to the house and protected from the wind, will be a lot safer than an area that's out exposed. Just a tree canopy overhead can stop the release of radiant energy at night and prevent a frost.
And exactly kind of what I was mentioning earlier, waiting until May is not a bad idea. I mean, I don't put a summer vegetable like a tomato, a squash, a zucchini, a pepper, I don't put it in the ground until May 1st. Yeah. So, I mean, it's
smart move.
You definitely want to watch your frost dates, know your frost dates, know your first frost date, is typically right around Election Day. So we've got 2 easy ones here in the Hampton Roads area, and it gives you a roundabout date. You got tax day, so when are your taxes due? Around April 15th. So that's about when our last frost date is, and our first frost would be about November 15th, which is around election time. So 2 easy dates to remember, and just kind of keep those in mind as you kind of begin your gardening. So back on those gorgeous cordyline. I mean, we've got a couple samples here, but really what I wanted to talk about there is that idea of the thriller, filler, and spiller. So the thriller is going to be the upright, which is going to be the cordyline in that case. And I love your idea, and I remember him teaching me this many, many years ago, that houseplants, or Mother Nature didn't create houseplants, right? I mean, nobody in Mother Nature said, hey, these plants are designed to be growing in your house. So they're all great plants. They really almost could be categorized as tropicals or annuals. I mean, so don't neglect what we sell or what we kind of group together as indoor plants. We've always tried to blur the lines there a little bit. And so, I mean, even as far as planting anthuriums as a annual in the ground.
Wonderful annual.
Yeah, so I mean, we've got an anthurium here. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous plant. You see these all the time. Of course, Valentine's Day, great gifts, great indoor plant. I mean, one of the easiest probably blooming indoor plants to grow. But don't neglect the fact that these are great in containers.
A container garden of that is
They're great in the landscape. I mean, you can do so many different things. So I just thought that was a good time to kind of mention that. But of course, that thriller is going to be your upright component. When we get to the end, we're going to talk about how we kind of built some containers, and we'll show that kind of idea a little bit more too. All right, let's keep moving on, because this will kind of help me get into the thriller or the filler and the spiller portion. But these are some gorgeous containers here as well.
So this is part shade. I get afternoon shade here, but full sun up until about 1 or 2 o'clock. And so I select plants specific for the location, because, what kind of growing conditions do I have there? The white there is stunning. That's a type of Elysium. Right now we're offering sweet Elysium, which has been around for years, and smell that fragrance. You just touch it, and there it is, a wonderful perfume that lifts the spirits when you smell it. So Elysium, the common annual Elysium, once it gets hot, it tends to fade out and rest until we get to cool weather. But that Elysium is a proven winter variety. That's a cross between 2 Elysium species. Yep. And it lasts right on into the cold weather. It really takes it pretty cool, but it has to get warm before we can bring it into the garden center. It won't get going till it's warm, but then in the fall when it cools down, it seems to last a long time. Yeah. It looks like that every day. It never fades as long as you keep the moisture to it, and it does like moisture.
It does.
But you get a wonderful spill, or if you grow it in the ground, it probably cover an area 3-4 feet in diameter. It's just a fabulous
classic traditional. I mean,
but
been grown for years.
You've got to get the one that has the proven winners.
Yeah, the
label.
proven winner, sweet Elysium, right?
Yeah.
Do they call it a sweet Elysium?
No, they use the botanical name. What is it? Lobularia. There you go. All right.
Lobularia, and then of course the Chrysander is absolutely stunning. A little bit more of a warmer season annual that we grow in this area.
Yeah,
absolutely stunning. That orange.
You've got to have the heat, but Chrysander is, and this one is called Orange Marmalade. My wife loves orange, so I have to decorate with orange all around. And I also plant Orange Marmalade with Croton. The combination of colors in the Croton. And as we go through the summer, the Croton grows very rapidly, and you get those spectacular oranges and yellows and golds that blend in with the Chrysander very nicely. And you'll also find that you've got the best Halloween exhibit in town. I mean, it is just fabulous color for the fall. So, and that's when it's in its peak of glory.
I love Crotons, and I use it as a color palette for fall, but also tropical too. I mean, it works great for the tropical season, and it transitions right into the fall season as well. So it's a great one. So we've got another one here with another Croton in it, but love these examples. That was that plant you were mentioning earlier, spilling over the front there.
The Russellia.
Yep.
Russellia is if you ever go down to Florida and see it growing in the landscapes there, it'll be a ground cover, and they'll call it Frexahatchee grass. Who knows where that name came from? But you can see those red, orangey red, tube-like flowers, and the hummingbirds will come up and they'll just feed on the nectar that is in those tubes. The other plant, I don't have a picture of it here, but I grow a sage, a gray-eye sage. It's a native of Texas, kind of a desert plant. It never makes a gorgeous show, but if you want hummingbirds, you have to have one. So I keep one on my deck, and twice a day the hummingbird comes through and visits all the flowers, and it's just fun to watch them dance around those flowers. And they're only there just a few minutes, bang. It's amazing how fast they can hit those flowers and gone. Yeah. But it's always a fun event, and Sarah and I call each other to come to the window and watch them dance out there.
And Deborah asked, do we carry those? Yes, we will. It needs warmth, too.
It's got to get warm. Look for those in May.
And she asked for the spelling. I don't know that I can spell it. I don't know that if you
probably not.
But I think the common name, I think they use Hummingbird Trumpet, or I think something like that, Hummingbird Trumpet grass.
Might be.
So type in, Deborah, if you're looking like on a Google search engine, type in Hummingbird Trumpet trailing plant, and you should find it.
I think it's Russellia.
There you go, Russellia. So hopefully that helps you find it, but we'll carry it here. It's just going to need a little bit of warmth before we get those in. All right, so
Mike, you've got a
million bell. That's right.
Million bells in that pot, Colabricoa, and you can see that is really. These plants are fabulous. It's a petunia family kind of thing, but the flowers are a little smaller than most petunias, but an abundance of flowers. And they bloom in the cool weather and the hot weather, so you've got flowers all the way. It wouldn't be unusual to have flowers at Christmas time, and a lot of people really get excited when they go out there in the spring and that plant is starting to come back out into flower. They will last through the winter, especially years when we have mild weather. Yeah. So Colabricoas, they're really in a great abundance of
Yeah.
colors and styles now. You can find them all kinds of ways.
Hold up that million bell again, or pick another one of those. So you can see, like you mentioned, very similar to like a miniature petunia, but different habits. So this guy is bubblegum and goes crazy. I mean, grows very, very big and very aggressive. In fact, you'll see this in an image later here in a second. But the million bells are great because they kind of bound, they kind of stay nice and connected to the container.
Yep.
Whereas this guy, you might either have to do some pruning or some maintenance to it because it's great in the landscape, it's great in containers, it's just aggressive. And this one's kind of like it's, less aggressive a brother or sister.
Yeah, yeah.
So you can see the kind of the difference there between a petunia and a million bell. I love million bells too. The color arrangement in million bells seems to have gotten so amazing.
Great range of colors.
I mean, just absolutely
And
stunning.
that's where you pick up the oranges and
Yep.
and some spectacular colors.
So you can get some really gorgeous colors in those million bells. So tell us about this one. This one's really cool. I love
Oh,
that.
I love
Pineapple
this.
really, but-
Diamond Frost. This is no one should miss this one.
Yeah.
This little teeny flowers are actually a euphorbia. Now you all know euphorbia. You use one every Christmas.
Yep.
You had a euphorbia this year, didn't you?
Of course.
We all do.
Poinsettias.
Poinsettias are fabulous. This is a cousin to a euphorbia. So these little white things are not actually flowers at all. They are modified leaves. And as modified leaves, they last a lot longer. So they're on this plant for a long period of time. It's always showing. The plant will weave itself in among other plants, and it's just a fabulous blend. So it's kind of like the old-fashioned baby's breath that was
Yep,
so
yep.
popular years ago. Well, this is baby's breath on steroids. It's just fabulous. It's very cold tolerant. You'll enjoy this thing at Christmas time, right outside.
Yep.
It just lasts and lasts and lasts. So a fabulous plant. Again, it's the folks at Proven Winners that we can thank for that.
Yep. And I think this one's just called Diamond Frost. There's another one called Snow Mound. So and sometimes they get put next to each other. So just be careful because Snow Mound does grow differently. I don't know if you've grown that one before.
More compact,
Yep.
denser flowering, but
Gorgeous.
it doesn't. Yeah, but it doesn't weave in
Right.
it to a combination planter like this Diamond Frost.
So a Snow Mound's almost like a filler that stays kind of by itself, maybe even a little bit of trail. But Diamond Frost, this one gets just amazing. And you can see it right there in your container. It is absolutely stunning how it just bobs and weaves throughout that entire thing. And then, of course, you paired it with that gorgeous white scabola, I think is what that is.
Yeah, Scabola is another one. You have to wait a little while for it to get
I
warm.
got one little guy in
All
here. It's
right,
a pink
not-
one. You can
not
barely
flowering
see it.
yet.
Yeah, but this is what you're going to get when you get them in this cooler time frame.
Yeah.
But it's a great plant, one of my favorite trailers.
Now these plants, you have to remember, the fellow that originated these things, Tom Smith, he always has a joke about plants one way or another. And he looks at them and he says, now if it eats like an elephant, feed it like an elephant. So you've got to fertilize these things. They have a high demand for fertilizer, but they will perform incredibly well.
I always love scabola because it's one of those plants that seems to me like it's indestructible.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you'll walk by and you'll be like, I've killed it. It's wilting and it's hanging and it looks so bad. And then you water it, perks back up.
Beautiful spiller.
Yeah, great spiller and virtually indestructible. It seems to be, at least. All right, so let's go. So that's kind of the spillers and fillers and thrillers. And so it's a very easy concept. When you're building a container, think of some upright height with your thriller. The filler is going to kind of fill that medium range, and then your spiller is going to go over the edge. And those were just some examples. Now we're going to really get into some really interesting containers.
Oh, the alocasias have come on strong. There's a lot of different ones. There's a big, huge black knight that gets, oh gosh, I took a little 1 gallon pot. It was very small. I planted it in my garden in a place that stays fairly uniform moist because these are aquatics, native to aquatic situations. But it was 5 feet tall and the leaves were probably 18 inches across by the end of the summer. This one is a dwarf form here, Alocasia poly, sometimes called African mask plant. And you can easily see why. It looks like an African mask, doesn't it? But this thing, that's about an 8-inch container there. So not too big a container, looking for something a little smaller. But through our summertime, it just loves our heat outside, and it makes a gorgeous patio plant.
And I assume this is a container that you probably bring in and enjoy inside.
Yeah. Alocasias are a tuber.
Yep.
So it will go dormant in a tuber, and you can overwinter it as a dormant tuber.
Okay.
Or you can bring it inside. Now I have a little struggle with them inside. There are some of the newer hybrid varieties that are performing well. This Poly happens to be one of them that does a little bit better in the dry conditions in our home through the wintertime. Just give it plenty of light and keep the moisture to it through the winter, and you can keep it growing.
So Alocasia elephant ear, right? I mean, is that the common name for alocasia, or is that,
It's in the elephant ear family. Yeah.
Okay. So think of an elephant ear bulb, that you might plant outside that's hardy. Same thing here. This is just a little bit more of a tropical.
I haven't tested the hardiness.
It might be.
It's a lot of things that I find that are listed as tropical, but sometimes, like the cordyline are actually will make it through the winter. It's just we don't have enough heat long enough to really make them pretty.
And this is a great container because I love the simplicity of it. It could just be that alocasia in there.
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't, but I think you've got a little dichondra spilling out the ends there, maybe is what that is.
Yeah.
And so just a very simple. It doesn't have to have all this, crazy flowering. It can be very, very simple and just absolutely stunning by itself. And here's another great example.
One of my favorites. I think bromeliads are one of the most underutilized, and the bromeliad is the big pink flower, sometimes called silver vase, because the foliage is a gray silver and it looks like a vase, and then you've got that wonderful pink flamingo, I call it, but that flower head. So I look for one in May that has got a tight bud to it, and in September it will still be very, very attractive in the landscape.
Yep.
So the bromeliad family has got a number of different species in it. Here you can see that bromeliad used with the Alocasia poly, kind of an unusual arrangement. And then there's a different type of bromeliad in the pot on the right-hand side of your screen there. That's Echimia. And no, we don't have an Echimia in here. That's another variety of that same pink one that's there. So Echimia fasciata and a different Echimia. Then another bromeliad family that I really enjoy are these, actually the botanical name is Neoregelia, but everybody calls them Neos. This one's a variegated foliage one. We're going to see a container in a little while that I think I'm in about my 8th year with it. Yeah. Spectacular piece. This plant only flowers one time. It's a pineapple family. So just like the pineapple only has one fruit, and that's the end of the mother plant. But then it will send out shoots from the side here. Sometimes you get 2 or 3, 4 shoots, and you'll get a cluster here. So then they're green when they come out and they have to mature. Usually over the winter, it will mature inside. It's a tropical, so I have to bring it in the house. And I keep it through the winter, and it's green until I take it outside. And then during the summer, it'll color up, and you get this wonderful colored foliage here. But that occurs during the summertime when it's warm and into the fall season. But these Neos will last the whole season long, so you get a colorful show for 6 to 8 months out of this plant.
And that's, again, goes back to using, our standard annual plants that we always say, but using something different. Those bromeliads are absolutely gorgeous. And it's a bit of a myth, right, that after, I think a lot of people think this, I know I did for a long time, that after the bromeliad, the mother plant blooms, it'll die. That's not true, right? It'll last for many years.
Yes, the original rootstock will last. I go in and cut out this plant, I will cut it out
And then let
at the base and leave the young plants coming up.
Yeah.
Sometimes I only get one, sometimes I get 2 or 3.
Yeah. We're going to
But
see
whatever it is.
a great example of that here in a little bit. We'll get to that. We've got lots and lots of slides to go through. In fact, hold on one second. Before we get moving on this, let's just make sure we didn't miss any questions. Let's see. So the spelling of the names, sure, we'll try and do some of that. Maybe we can have some of our marketing team try and spell some of these as well. Alice asked if we'll have the jazzberry. I think I've got the jazzberry right next to you, that hot pink. It looks like a million bell, but it's a petunia. So it's the one next to it. Yep,
This
that one, yeah. So yes, Alice, to answer your question, we will. We've got it right now. We've got the jazzberry. Let's see. Let me see what I'm doing here. There we go. So the jazzberry, the super tunia, we've got them in stock here at the Independence store, and I'm pretty sure at our Great Neck location as well. It's the brand new one from Proven Winners this year. So great question, Alice. We got them for sure. Let's see. Speaking of hummingbirds, will you have the Black Knight butterfly bush? We should. I don't know if we carry the Black Knight anymore, but we definitely carry lots of butterfly bushes, and we love our hummingbirds in the area.
Well, that's the salvia Black Knight.
Oh, that might be what she was talking
Yeah,
about.
I think that's a salvia perennial. It grows very fast, gets very big, maybe 4 to 5 feet.
Yep.
Quickly, hard to do in a container, but it will be. I would say it's going to be May before that's available.
Yeah.
It's a little early yet.
There is a darker colored purple butterfly bush, and I don't know if it had the name Black Knight, but that if that, because I know you mentioned butterfly bush, but Rebecca, will have Black Knight salvia for sure. We always carry that one, and we'll have lots of different types of butterfly bushes. And as we get warmer and warmer, we love our pollinators. We support our pollinators. We celebrate Pollinator Week like probably no other garden center. So definitely check us out, Rebecca. We'll have tons of stuff for your hummingbirds and butterflies and all of our great pollinators, bees alike. Let's see. Love Diamond Frost, another happy birthday wish. Let's see. When is the best time to come in? Well, Deborah, the best time to come in is every week, I think. I mean, every week it changes. But I think May is probably a good time to really come in.
That's an interesting thing. You find a garden center is really, I view it as a series of windows. We're in the cool season window right now. The things that perform in the cool weather that can get through even a light frost. So the things like the sweet Elysium or these colabricoas will take the cooler temperatures. But the warm season things haven't got going, and so it'll be May for those. And then there's another window in June when the tropical plants really hit their peak, are full stride. You know, the mandevillas are fabulous flowers that bloom all summer long. It's a tropical shrub, and I find that if it's here too early, if we try to jump the gun and get into April with it, and we get some cool nights, that will check that plant, and it will actually underperform one that is just a little bit later once it's warmed up. So you really want to take advantage of our wonderful tropical summer heat here in Eastern Virginia, and wait till it gets here in May.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I know there's people that are watching. Deborah, I know, is in Richmond. So if you're watching from further away and you are planning on coming here, definitely May or June, great times to come.
Yeah.
But if you're local, if you live in the Hampton Roads, I really recommend coming every week. Of course I would. I want you here in the store so you can see everything we're doing, because it changes just so rapidly. So definitely come and check us out as much as you possibly can. But if it's as little as you can, May, June, great time to come and see us. All right, let's get into these, what I would maybe call a little bit more drought-tolerant containers.
Oh, looking for the desert plants, that's where you pick up this drought tolerance. This is an incredibly forgiving plant. Euphorbia, the old-fashioned name of crown of thorns, but it's another member of the Euphorbia or poinsettia family. Just like this diamond frost, this Euphorbia, and this particular one's called pink Cadillac.
Gorgeous. Just stunning.
Interesting name. I can almost guarantee if you've got a bright sunny window through the winter time, you will have flowers every day of the year. This plant just never quits. It's got a very thick, succulent type central trunk, and those leaves, if it gets too dry, it might shed the leaves, but as soon as it gets water again, it'll start growing and reproduce those leaves. So much like the cactus and succulents that are surrounding this plant here, we can see Portulacaria there that used as kind of a spiller. The sedums, that little lime green ground cover in there is a sedum, and then there's some, that's an aloe right there, and on the right hand side up in that gray foliage is an echeveria called topsy-turvy.
There's so many different types, aren't there, these days?
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's important to know the types that you're growing, because, like, I grabbed that little succulent right there, and you can show that one. That one's winter hardy. So this one, you can grow outdoors and you can grow it year round.
I have it in a container
Year
year round.
Yep. And so really, really good option there. But I think most of these are probably ones that you're going to have to bring in during the winter. So ask us the questions. That's what we're here for. If you've got different types of succulents that you're growing in containers, you might grow a container that can be designed to be left outside because maybe that's what you want, or one that you can grow outside during the summer but bring back in during the winter season. So here's another great example.
Oh, this is a succulent container. This is probably 6 or 7 years old. And finally I said, I'm tired of this now, because I love to try different plants and experiment with things and learn so that I can share this information. But I left this one outside this year. First time up until this year, I put it in the garage in late November, and my garage has no windows in it. I do open the doors if it's above 40 degrees through the winter. I never watered it all winter long, and every year I bring it out mid-April, set it back out on the patio, and every year it's just gorgeous. I mean, if it gets overgrown and too big, you just cut it back. The central trunk will re-sprout and come out, and so you've always got something. But I left it outside this year. We had the 20 degrees. That killed the lime green plant, low plant in the center. It killed the big succulent with the big foliage in the background. But my favorite, since I was a kid, Gray Ghost, is the rosettes that are sitting all around there. And Gray Ghost makes a fabulous plant. I'm surprised that it made it because we had a lot of moisture. This plant, like most succulents, doesn't like moisture in the winter. They like to be dry through the cold weather, and then during the summertime you can water them anytime, just like any other plant. And the more you water them, the more they thrive. But during the wintertime, they like to be dry. At any rate, all of these stems are budded now. They've got flower buds coming. It's a very unusual flower. But it's fun to talk about, and it's fun to watch. And so Gray Ghost, it'll grow long chains. I was in Spain a few years ago, and they grow them on the balconies there, and they'll talk about a trailer, a spiller. Right. That one will spill 4 or 5 feet long. These chains of that Gray Ghost, they're fabulous.
Absolutely stunning. And so succulents make a great container, and then of course, sometimes it's good. Now I know this one straight above me with the Transcantia. I'm not quite sure if I
You
ever
look
say that
good
right.
with it all around your head there.
But I know that one's a little bit of a combo because I think there is a Chrysandra in there. But I love growing a container with just one type of plant. And I always forget this term. What is it when there's one type of plant in a container versus multiple plants? And like
monoculture?
Monoculture. So yeah, monoculture is a great way of doing it. And you can group them. So you can have one plant in 3 different pots, and then you've got yourself a combo container, basically, just in 3 different separate containers. But these are great examples of a bird's nest fern or a type of fern. I'll let you be the expert on that.
Oh, I was shocked a few years ago. I'd never paid much attention to bird's nest ferns, and I got to liking the structure of them as they age. So I've got one now that, it's not this one, but I've got another one I think I'm in the 4th year. And it's getting better and better and better. It's a more dwarf, compact type. But these bird nest ferns live up in the trees,
Yep.
and they're used to getting very dry. So unlike most ferns, this one is very forgiving when it gets dry.
Yep.
And that's a huge advantage. So I bring it inside during the winter. The foliage still looks good all winter.
Yep.
It's a fairly bright area. I've got it. Mine is growing now. New fronds are coming out from the base there, that bird's nest in the middle. And it's really interesting to watch those fronds slowly come out of the center there. But for an architectural kind of look
Yep.
on a patio, to grow a single plant in a pot, this thing is really tough as nails, durable plant, and you're growing a fine house plant as well.
I think everybody loves ferns. They always want to grow ferns, and a lot of them need a fair amount of water or different types of requirements. But bird nests are definitely, I think, probably one of the hardiest and easiest ferns to grow.
Great fern to grow.
Yep. And then, of course, I'm butchering the Latin language, the
Tradescantia.
Tradescantia, thank you.
Yeah.
So that's a gorgeous plant as well. Just really, really cool looking with that variegated purple and white.
I always call it seersucker somehow. It's got those stripes in it.
So gorgeous containers. Now here's those, what is that, Dracaena with those bromeliads around it?
Yes, this is Dracaena called Colorama. I love it for its spectacular colored foliage there. On the right-hand side, you see the plant 5 years ago. On the left-hand side, you see it sitting in my living room right now.
Wow.
I took that picture about a week ago. So it's got that low branch there. Mike, if you'll move yourself out of the way, please.
Sure.
Then we can see, you see that branch that's laying down there. So it was very upright last summer, and then we had a heavy rain. And that rain weighted that head down and caused it to lean over.
Yep.
Well, I started to cut it off. And then I said, I know that Dracaenas, when the branches are horizontal, they'll sprout all along the branch. So sure enough, if you could see up close on this photograph, and we'd have to zoom in very close. Mike is talented here, but I don't know as he can zoom in right now. Anyway, it's got about 5 or 6 suckers along the stem there, right in the center of that plant.
Can't quite get there.
Yeah. So it will fill itself in. Plus, I think it's kind of artistic to have that one branch that hangs down there to the side. The other feature that I wanted to talk about is this is a great opportunity to see the bromeliad on the right is called one of those neos, and you can see it in bloom there, or in full color. The foliage colors up during the summertime outside on my patio. And then you see the same plant, but this is probably 3 generations later.
Wow.
And you see how full and upright it is. So when I take it back outside, latter part of April, that foliage will flatten out across it, and it will color up. And this year I've got 2 sprouts, so I'm going to have 2 heads on it. Every year up until now I've only gotten 1 head, but this time I'm getting 2, and we'll have the colored foliage through the summer out on the patio. And then I'll bring it in for the winter again, and at some point now, the original plant is still buried down in that foliage, but I'll go in there and take the pruning shears and just prune that one out here shortly for summertime. But the beauty of having a plant year after year, you get to really enjoy the full beauty of it, because the Dracaenas, quite honestly, I almost threw the Dracaena away years ago because it got spindly and ugly, and I said, do I really want to keep this around? It's looking bad. But over time, it has developed these nice, robust heads and really become very vigorous, good-looking plant.
That is gorgeous. Now, you do have a little bit of sun on your property.
Yeah, but this is full
still in
shade
shade,
here.
yeah.
These are shade, yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because that's right. Because it's banana with the impatiens.
Oh,
underneath it.
yeah, bananas in the page, that's full sun. Yeah, you gotta get out in the sun. But if you want a tropical look, there's nothing like the bananas.
Yeah.
There's the red leaf banana, which is a different species.
Right.
And then this is probably Bajou, the winter hardy banana. That's actually a fiber banana. If you've seen manila rope, that's the banana fibers.
Yep.
So you just dry those leaves out, and you'll find they're very fibrous in there. And they what do you call it when you shred they strip the veins of the plant and make that long fibers, and then they weave that actually on a spinning wheel.
Oh wow.
And they make little threads, and then that thread is fed into a machine, a nozzle that spins into rope.
Yep.
And the sailing vessels needed 600-foot long rope.
Wow.
And it was made sometimes from the fiber from this banana. And then there's the edible bananas, and we see a number of people here in Tidewater growing the edible types. During the wintertime, you can let it go dormant, store it in your garage, or I used to put mine under the house where it stays pretty much a constant 58 degrees, and the plant just rests there, and then in the spring you take it back out and put it in the ground. And those big ones will, in a long season year, and we seem to be having some of those,
Right.
you can actually produce bananas here.
Wow. Absolutely stunning. So look at this. Another one of I
Oh.
know your favorite plants.
Yeah,
Caladiums.
I love caladiums in the shade or the sun. And where they grow these bulbs in Sebring, Florida, capital of caladiums for the whole world. They grow these out in fields in the full sun, but they really color up the best in shade like this, and you can see what a stunning plant you can make. Just give it a nice big container, plenty of room, and get a good sized bulb and put in there, and over the summer you can make this great cluster. Many new varieties coming. There's been a lot of breeding work going on with caladiums, and we're seeing new introductions. Proven Winners has got some excellent varieties. Some of the varieties from Thailand are brought into the breeding work, and we're getting some very interesting caladium leaves now.
Caladiums are absolutely stunning, and you're right, in the shade that white just pops. But caladiums come in many different colors. I kind of compare them a little bit to coleus as a foliage color that you can really have a lot of fun with. I mean, when you get into container gardening and you start trying to play off of different colors, you get a wide range of assortment. You know, think of like the croton that we were looking at earlier, where you got foliage that has lots and lots of different colors in it. It's so much fun to play with.
Mike, I'll just mention while you're on this slide, if you look right on the edge of on the left-hand edge of the photograph there, you see those dark black leaves up there? That is that alocasia black magic that I was talking about earlier. Over the summer, that's in a big container, and I'm sorry I don't have a whole picture of it, because it's really a very special plant. I mean, you want an exotic tropical look, grow one of the big alocasias. Yeah, once it gets warm in May, we'll have some nice specimens of alocasias.
Here's another stunner for a shade area. You could actually grow it in a little bit of sun, but I think Carex, which is that gorgeous grass, just does an amazing job in the shade.
I love this Carex. It's an ornamental grass. It's a perennial. This is probably a 5 or 6 year old container. I originally grew it as a combo planter, and then there was two plants that are planted in there that Carex. Over the summertime, it grows out those long foliage, maybe, what is that, 2 feet long, each leaf on there. And in the spring, then it sends up flower seed spikes. It's seeding right now. They're okay, but not spectacular like many of the fall grasses. Yeah. So at that point, I just shear it back pretty close, maybe 6 to 8 inches tall, and it'll quickly flush out and start to cycle over. The other thing I want to talk about is impatiens. We had, 10, 15 years ago, we were supplying huge numbers of impatiens. And then the disease hit them.
Yep.
And we had a lot of folks disappointed that in late summer and August and September, a disease called downy mildew was wiping out their fabulous displays. So we were denied that great impatient show, and it went from the #1 bedding plant in America to the bottom of the charts almost overnight.
Yep.
So very few being sold. Now we've got the Beacon series, which is a new introduction about 3 years ago. And they're becoming much more prevalent now. You should be able to find the Beacon series of impatiens. These are resistant to downy mildew. They don't seem to be affected by the disease. So once again, we're having impatiens for the shade. Now we've had the sun impatiens, which resist the disease, but they don't perform as well in the shade.
Yeah.
Look for the Beacon series. There's a second series, XMD, some initial, some strange initial, and I can't remember what that is right now, but the Beacon series is the one to look for.
And if you've never grown impatiens, man, I mean, they are just awesome. They
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
trail, they
Yeah.
bloom, it seems like forever. And they can really fill in some space, whether it's in the landscape or in a container.
And my wife is happy again because there's oranges.
So here's another great one with another bromeliad,
Yeah,
another cordyline, and some ferns.
Yeah, that fern is a yellow foliaged fern,
Yep.
Boston type, that makes good hanging baskets. And we carry a few of the yellow one, but mostly people want the classic green fern. But to get these neo bromeliads, they're just fabulous and well worth your effort for the summertime.
They're just absolutely stunning. And I love that picture. It's just a great picture. It just, brings you,
Yeah.
I think it just brings me peace to look at that with the sun kind of shining through. It's just absolutely gorgeous.
You know, in its native habitat, these bromeliads actually grow in the trees.
Yep.
It's a epiphyte.
Epiphyte, yep.
Yeah, so they grow up in the trees. Their root system is just for anchoring. They take the water into their foliage more than they do through the leaves. Not that they need a whole lot of water. That plant is just tough as nails.
It is.
And it doesn't do anything very fast.
It is slow. And there's lots of plants that grow in trees like orchids and the bromeliads and
Yeah.
tillandsias and a lot of different things that, and the bird's nest fern, which I actually didn't know that. So, see, and this is why we love gardening, right? Because almost every day you can learn something new. So this is a great one with that anthurium that we were mentioning earlier. Really stunning plant.
Yeah.
I know one of your favorites.
Oh, you can grow these anthuriums over the summer. They just get bigger and bold. So this plant will about double in size. You'll have a lot of flowers on it. You can bring it inside in the fall, and at Christmas time, you will have an abundance of flowers. Probably by Valentine's, if you're growing it, recycling it, you've really got to be good to have flowers on it for Valentine's inside.
Yeah.
But it makes a good foliage plant, and then come March, you'll see buds coming out inside your home. It'll flower, begin flowering, and you can take it back out. And I've got a plectranthus around there. There's a lot of plectranthus that are used in gardening now, and they make great fillers and spillers.
Yeah. Kind of a duo there, right?
Yeah.
Does both.
All
Gorgeous
right.
neon color.
Yeah.
Oh, there's that Stramanthe.
I
I got a
love
little
this
one
plant.
right here for you.
I have to talk about this a little
I know
bit.
you do.
This is one of my favorites. This tropical plant is fairly cold resistant, but you can take a plant even this small and make a nice plant over the summertime. Now this is in what's commonly called the prayer plant family. So at night, the leaves will tend to fold up some. Surprise. Look at what you see underneath.
Absolutely.
You get this great color here. And then if you're fortunate enough to have a place, and I have such a place, where I position this in an east-facing place. It gets sunlight till about 9 o'clock in the morning. So I go out early in the morning, say 6, 7 o'clock, and the sun is streaming through that foliage. So I get this that the white portion on that side will turn pink.
Oh, wow.
The light streaming through this is fabulous. This is just, so you think it's blooming all the time.
Right.
And then this fall, you'll bring it inside in November, and you'll treat it as a house plant. But by then it's got stems up, and those stems will elongate during the winter, and then they will set buds on them, and it has the neatest, like a rosebud flower at the end of each shoot that's coming up. See, this plant's got 3 right now, and by the end of the summer you'll probably find 5 or 6 shoots in here. So each shoot at the end of it will have this spectacular rose white flower. Some of them are pink, but most of them you'll find this. In fact, this one is pink. I get it confused with another member of this family that has the white flowers. Yeah. This one has pink flowers, but that same rose-like look. Yeah. Fascinating. So then you cut those back in April, and you take it back outside and you grow it again. So finding ways to not abandon these plants, but to grow them year after year, and you get some real surprises and some great treats. This is a very special plant. Don't miss Stromanthe Trio Star.
Absolutely stunning. I mean, there you can see, like, as he mentioned, those new shoots coming up, or maybe this was early in the morning and they hadn't folded back out, but you can see it almost looks like blooms spiking up throughout the foliage. Absolutely stunning. Let's see, what would we got next? We've got so many to go through here. Shrimp plant, of course.
Oh, golden shrimp plant, another one. Hard to find things that bloom in the shade. Golden shrimp plant is one of them. In fact, this is a little too much sun here, but it does force a lot of good flowering on it. And those candles, I call them, they're spike-like yellow. Yep. And then actually the white is, you can see some little white tubes-like structures on there. That's the actual flower. The yellow part is modified leaves that hold the white flowers up there. So the yellow and white combination in the shade, you can't beat it. Because in the shade, the lighter colors, especially white, are the things that really show up the best. Is you know, when you work every day, you get home in the evening, maybe you have a glass of wine and you sit out there, and as the sun goes down and it gets dark, that white still glows in the landscape. So that's one of the things I look for in my shady garden. What's going to look nice as the sun goes down out here when I'm holding hands with Sarah, you know.
And I always feel like yellow is such a popular color, and we all search for that in the shade. In the sun, you've got tons of options for yellow. In the shade, it's a little bit of a harder color to get, and so you get the yellow there with that white. It's absolutely stunning. And then this.
Oh,
one of our
bubble gum.
There comes that bubble gum again. Remember I was talking about bubble gum there?
Bubble gum. This is a Supertunia, and this was a collection of 3 varieties of Supertunia. And there you can see the white, the pink, and the red all blended together. You've got to love Supertunias. Yeah. This, believe it or not, Mike, this is probably a 15-inch diameter container. Wow. It's a footed container, so it stands about 24 inches high, and I just bought a hanging basket and planted it in that container. I didn't even make a design here. It's just plop.
Yeah, it's a great idea, just taking a hanging basket. I mean, sometimes if you're having a party, you can just slip it in a container just to get you through the day real quick. But plant one in a container, and man, look at what it can do for you. Absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to bring up, he taught me something the other day, or maybe it was something that maybe I had kind of considered but never really thought through, and that he's been thinking about recently. When it comes to container gardening, I think a lot of us do these mixes of different types of plants, and we're trying to put on a little mini show or a little mini landscape right there in our container. But something like this is impact. And that's what you see in landscape design these days is major impact, especially in businesses where they're saying, stop here, come and see
Yeah.
us. Let me plant 100 of one color pansy or 100 of this, out front. You'd be able to see them and you'd stop, and that's what you're trying to do. So think about the distance. You were explaining the distance the container is of where you want somebody to view it from.
If you've got a container, like we've got this petunia here with this wonderful detail, colibricola, excuse me. It's got this wonderful detail of variegation. And when we're up close, say 6 feet or closer, we see that detail.
Yep.
And it's very obvious to us. So all of that detail, whether it's different varieties of plants or whatnot, you see it clearly. But if this is sitting on my front porch and I'm expecting the drive-by folks with the curb appeal, then this doesn't have the curb appeal for me because it doesn't show up as well. I want a solid, bold color. So I would rather have one color and have enough of it to make an impact from 50 feet away. So you have to keep in mind when you're planting your containers, what's the distance perspective?
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, we were talking about it the other day. I mean, we made these containers, and we'll show them here in a minute. They're great for a personal, on the patio or something. But if you're trying to put on a show, go big, go bold, go simple.
Yes.
Sometimes.
Yep.
And then, of course, you love these little collectible conifer, tiny treasures.
Oh, Mike, I love talking about this. I do a bowl of these, about an 18-inch bowl like that. I've got. There you go, perfect. That's a wonderful bowl. So now I plant this right in the center here, and I take this little sedum right here, or in this case, I'd rather find a ground cover that is dark green, just to contrast with this yellow foliage, because this is a taxus here. It's a woody shrub, and the plant that you saw in the slide there was one that I started about 7 or 8 years ago. And I had it in a color bowl, like we just saw, starting out with this size right here. It lasted for about 4 years on my patio. It looks like this every day of the year. It is this golden color. The new growth comes out this golden yellow, and in the fall it's still pretty yellow. Through the winter it fades some, and by spring you're ready for the new growth, and out comes this lime green that turns yellow again. But by using that woody plant, I got 4 years in the container. Well, by then it had gotten larger. Now this was several years ago, and I put it in a pot because I didn't have a place in the garden for it. Right. I keep looking for a home. I've tried to sell my son on it. He's got all this room he needs to plant something, and I want him to put together a collection of dwarf conifers because there's a number of them. There's another one here. This is a dwarf hinoki cypress, and they're very slow growing. Yep. I mean, when you get one the size of that pot there, it's probably 7 years in that container, and if you had to buy it, it would be very expensive. Right. I mean, it's a collector item, and that's what you're growing with these things, is collector items, and you can get some very unique plants. I've got another one that's a flowering spirea that I love. It's 7 years in the pot now, in a bowl, and it sits on my patio because I have these pedestals around the edge of the patio, and each one of those pedestals has another color bowl with just a single conifer in it, and it looks every day of the year. It looks the same.
And it's one of those containers you don't have to worry about either.
Yeah.
You leave it out all winter. They're conifers. They love the cold.
Yeah.
They absolutely love it. And so it's a great way of growing things. If you are worried about growing, or maybe like I mentioned earlier, you don't have a landscape. You don't have the space. Japanese maples are a great thing to collect. The little tiny conifers are amazing. And so it's a great idea.
So Mike, I did want to mention that when you're using a container like that, you want a stoneware container.
Yeah.
These ceramics are nice, but
where was that one?
Will you be able to get 6 or 7 years out of it? So this is a high-fired, very high-fired, so that makes this much more solid container that will last a long time. Concrete's another one that you might go to, looking for something a container that will last a long time, so that your shrub won't be sitting there in a container that's falling apart. If I did this in plastic, I would only get a year or two, and then I'd have to redo the container. Yeah. But by having a good, solid, high-fired stoneware, I can have it last a long time.
And the higher the fire, usually with the rougher the surface on the inside, isn't that?
Yeah, it's usually a rougher, more
so
antique.
You can kind of feel it when you're looking at your containers, and you kind of feel the inside, especially, but even the outside sometimes. You'll feel that kind of rougher kind of texture, and that's because it's been fired at a much higher temperature and should be a little bit more durable.
And this pot looks like it's lightweight. It's a thinner wall, but it's heavy.
It is heavy, and that also is a good telltale sign too that it's going to be a good container and last a long time. So, all right, let's see what else. Oh, so this is where we like to kind of jump and do something a little bit different. You don't always have to grow in a pot that sits on your patio or your porch. You can also grow things that hang, right?
Hanging baskets are a lot of fun. And here's that plant that I was just talking about, that Stramanthe, in the center of that hanging basket. And I've used the pothos called Neon. There's another house plant, and Wandering Jew in there. And that combination in the shade has done very well over the summer. Now, I do a pair of these, one on the other side. I've got a pair of mourning doves that wanted to make a home there.
Of course.
So this is very close to my front porch, and as you walk in and out of the front door, and we use the front door a lot, there he is, 4 to 5 feet from your face. He and Mama sit there calm as can be and look at you, and you look at them, and then you go on. It's fascinating to watch those birds and make a home there.
It is. That's funny. And they seem to come back probably every year, right?
Oh, yeah. Once they're there, you got them.
And here's another gorgeous example. I mean, so container gardening, when you're doing combinations, you can do them up in the air. A lot of us might run out of space on the ground or on our porch or patio, and great option here.
Mike, we didn't talk about the other plants in here. There's Nephthyitis. That's Neon robusta. It's a patented variety, but really quite a good. It brings out the pink in that foliage and matches up with the Wandering Jew well. And then I used maidenhair fern. I love maidenhair fern. In the summertime here, that lacy foliage just lays out, and it just shimmers in the breeze, the lightest little breeze, and it shimmers and gives a little movement to the landscape. So a lot of fun to grow maidenhair ferns
and let's and movement is awesome in the garden. And the ferns move, and just
and palms. Gotta have a palm.
Palm with the noise too. I love the noise. Okay, so of course we mentioned earlier by Faye, who asked the question, and we'll try and breeze through this because I know we're approaching almost 2 hours. We can talk, can't we? But let's just go and delve into this subject just a little bit, because a lot of us are so interested in growing food. I think herbs is a great place to start because they're pretty simple. They don't take up a lot of space. And you can actually grow them in a little bit of shade, but they perform best in sun. But it's a great option to kind of, you can mix them, you can put a lot in a little container. So great option here. What's your thought on herbs?
Oh, I love growing the herbs. My son became involved in cooking, and he spent a year with us. Fortunately, enjoyed every minute of it, and he did all the cooking while he was there. Now, one of the things he does is use a lot of herbs, so I said, all right, I'm going to have herbs for him. So I potted up a collection of herbs, had them right outside the back door there, tried to make them as attractive as I could. So I had rosemary, which is wonderful for soups and spicing fish and chicken and all. I had oregano, makes a very attractive ground cover, spiller. Good plant to use. It's colorful. You get the golden oregano, that's a good one. I used several types of thyme experimenting. What I found was that I think it's the English thyme grows with the longest single stems. So he really liked that because you can take it and you strip those stems very quickly. Whereas you get a bunch type and you got all these little stems, and then it's just hard to make a little dish there to use it as a spice in your cooking. So those were and I had mint there. What else did I have? And sage.
Sage.
So you can plant some parsley on the side if you're into Italian parsley. I know a lot of people use a lot of that. That's a biennial and a little different item, but a great container plant.
Yep.
And then you get the monarchs that hit it in the springtime, and you'll be watching, and one day here you've got this big Italian cypress. Parsley,
yep.
Italian parsley there, and 2 days later, where did the leaves go? They're all gone. I was getting ready to cook with them, and they're gone. Don't worry. It's going to regrow. Yep. It'll come right back out and do a nice job for you. And meanwhile, all of those butterfly larvae have pupated, and they've dropped down into the soil, and soon you'll have more monarchs floating around. Yeah. So good to grow it for two reasons. You're encouraging butterflies, and you're having good food to eat. Yep. And I love the fresh flavors. Since I started using herbs, I get a lot better flavor in my foods, and that's been an important activity as we've tended to stay home for a couple of years.
Right. And so that's what growing food is all about, is, being able to harvest something and enjoy it. And there's always nothing better than tasting something that you've grown yourself. I know Mr. Anderson wants to talk about this, and he could talk about this for hours and probably hours, but we'll try and mention it real quick because Faye brought it up, and it's an important subject, growing your own food. And he's taught me a great deal about these earth boxes. They are absolutely amazing. If you can't grow in the ground and you want to grow some vegetables, it doesn't have to be vegetables. It could be a lot of different things. But if you're trying to grow something, this is the secret box. It's scientifically proven, and they've done a lot of research into it. It's absolutely amazing. So I'll let him kind of tell you a little bit about it.
It's probably been 15 years ago or maybe more that I got on a plane with a friend of mine, flew down to Florida, and we met Mr. Wisenart. Mr. Wisenart got a gold medal from the American Horticultural Society for inventing this. It's an incredible thing. He was a tomato farmer down there in the fields of Florida, about my age then. and his son had not been kind to that poor gentleman. And it showed years in the field. But during that time that he was out in that tomato field, he learned to think like a plant. He could really get into that plant. And it caused him to think through this process. He made the first earth boxes in concrete. And I visited those concrete structures, amazing to see them. And he learned to make this, and then he paired up with a plastic manufacturer to make it out of plastic. This is an incredible invention. The way the fertilizer is delivered to the plant, you put enough fertilizer in here, you would think for sure you're going to kill the plant. No, because of the way it's delivered. And it's got a self-watering feature so that when you grow in this, until the plants get extremely big, you probably every 30 days you water it. Once you get a big crop on here, you might water it once a week or so. Yeah. So not only can you do a great job with vegetable gardens in this, but you take that bubble gum, put 2 bubblegum petunias in there, and put one of these cordyline in it, whichever type suits your fancy. 3 plants, you will have a spectacular, what will that be? This wide on either side, so you're probably 6 to 8 feet across. So for a patio or a deck, grow some flowers in this thing and enjoy it. It's trouble-free. You can go on vacation.
Yeah.
Not too long now. and really have a great show out of it. So, and if you're going to grow vegetables, I certainly would consider growing this. I grow my vegetables in the ground, most of them, but there's a lot of new vegetables now coming on the market, a lot of dwarf things. You can grow a tomato in a little 2-gallon pot, and and get a respectable harvest out of it.
Yep.
And they're delicious. There's little cherry tomatoes,
yeah.
but there's lettuces, there's a bean, snap beans. You grow this pot here full of snap beans, and you'll have plenty of snap beans to eat over the summer.
So you can definitely grow edible plants in containers. You know, I know Deborah mentioned the fruit trees, maybe not fruit trees necessarily. There might be some options out there for you, but growing in a container like this, you can get a great crop. And it's really easy too. So Faye, I know this is really interesting to you if you're still watching, hopefully. But Faye, if you've got nothing but sand, if you live right on the beach, which is what it sounds like you are, this might be your only option. And it's a great option. And it's really easy because it's got really basic instructions. It's very simple, and it comes with everything you need other than the soil and the plants. So you need about a 1.5 cubic feet, I think, or almost 2 cubic feet of soil.
Yeah, it's pretty big.
So go ahead and fill it up with soil. Get your soil right. You know, the all-purpose McDonald potting soil would work perfectly in here. And then it comes with the nutrients. It comes with the dolomitic lime, which is important. And then you just buy a couple tomato plants or a tomato and a pepper, and you've got yourself a great little box that you can grow in. And then we sell the additional dolomitic lime and fertilizer plant food kit with another top cover on it as well. Comes in it's basically a refill kit. So once you get your box, you can always come back and get the refill kit, get your plants for the next season. It's really, really awesome. It's just an amazing kit. And it's easy to water. So it comes up with a tube that sticks up over here. You fill it up with water. You wait for the water to
Easy
overflow.
to do.
Yeah, super, super easy. It's a great option. All right, so now that we've done that, I think we pretty much have covered everything. I don't know that we really need, the only thing that I'm going to do is we'll pop up these containers we planted the other day since I mentioned it a few times. I don't really think we need to go into great depth about it. Let me grab this one for you. Sorry, reach across everybody. There we go. Of course, we planted in a nice ceramic pot. So here is Mr. Anderson's that he planted up because he loves this cordyline, and this is that kind of thriller, spiller, filler idea. So a little bit less spill, but more of the fill.
Yeah. I wanted to show the coloring here because it's in tune with the all the houses I see now are white and black and gray. So this is right in line with that for a fashion statement. And then I like burgundy with gray. I always think that that's nice. So the burgundy stems of this cordyline give us a nice contrast, and then the pink flowers with it. So I'm always looking at the cost of the plants that go into a container. I found this one to be pretty cost effective because I used just 2 packs of annuals here, these little 4 packs, and so I could do 4 or 6 begonias in here.
Yep.
And I used Dusty Miller. Dusty Miller gives a silver gray that matches the container very nicely, or for kind of a monochrome look there. I like Dusty Miller because it gets a almost white center as that new growth comes out. They bloom in the second year usually. It's more of a biennial than it is an annual. So in the first year you get mostly foliage growth. When you start early like this, you might get flowering by the end of the year. It'll send up spikes of yellow flowers here that a lot of times I cut them off depending on the container style you use. But in this container, I'd probably want to hold them down a little bit. Then I also, where is this container going to go? Now, I made this one so that it's
360.
Yeah, it's 360. It's the same all the way around. And so on my patio, I can go out there and maybe once every 2 weeks or so, I'll turn it 180 degrees so that the sun hits it all the way around. And I can grow a very symmetrical container. If this was going up against a wall or in a corner or something, I might remove this Dusty Miller here. Let's say it was going to sit with the wall right back here, and I would have 2 Dusty Miller coming up in the back, and I'd have another begonia here, and so I'd have a nice pink show on the front here, contrasting with the burgundy and the gray, and we'd be done. It's fairly economical. This particular cordyline is a little more expensive. But boy,
Absolutely stunning, though.
they are spectacular.
And I've had one. I think you said you've had one for a few years. I've had
Oh,
one
yeah,
for a few years
yeah.
too. I mean, they really make it pretty good. I did bring it in during that really cold snap that we had recently.
Yeah, you would need to.
which protected it, but that's why we grow in containers sometimes,
But
right?
but you'll find that you can strip the bottom leaves off the last year's
Yep.
leaves, because they after about a year they start looking a little bad. So you just strip the old ones off. It flushes new ones out of the top,
It's gorgeous.
and you get a great
I
plant.
just love that kind of drapey habit that it has
Yeah.
too. Whereas like that firm kind of green spike that you get typically, you know, the old-fashioned green spike just stays straight up. But this guy drapes. It's
So
really
you
cool.
did a whole different style. Let's
Yep,
take a
here,
look
I can
at that
move
one.
yours right over here. And let's see if I can pick this one up. So I did a little bit of a different style. So mine is definitely flat-sided. So you can see this would not be the front. So we'll turn it and make it the back. So this would be great for like on a porch or patio up against a wall, or maybe even on a step where you've got another container behind it. Now, two different schools of thought here. His container is designed for growth throughout the season. Now mine will be fine, but I do this to show, one, if you want to put a bunch of plants in a pot, you can do it. It's okay. Just realize that you're going to run into some things that you're going to have to deal with. A great example would be this osteospermum, this African daisy. They can get pretty big. They're a pretty aggressive plant. This Acorus, or is it it's an Acorus, right? I think. I can't remember which one I used. Yeah. It's a water plant.
That's a
really.
rush.
Rush, thank you. So it's an actual water plant. I mean, these grow right right in streams and waterways and in ponds and stuff. So it can take up a lot of water. So I planted this one because I got a party coming up this weekend. And I wanted to put on a show. So put on a little bit of a show here. I got my trailing Dusty Miller. And this really brings in those three elements. The thriller, the filler, and the spiller. And I've got that new Jazzberry Petunia from Proven Winners. And the reason I planted that was because I've got a little bit of soft pink here in this osteo. That's got a little bit of pink in there. So it ties into that. I've got the Dusty Miller, the trailing Dusty Miller for that really hard fall. And it'll kind of pop all over the place too. And then I even tucked in a little diamond frost over here. So I know Eddie's over there kind of cringing a little bit like, oh, you put too much in there. And I would agree, I did. And I did it on purpose to show that you can do a couple different things. You can plant for success for the entire season.
Yeah.
His is going to be absolutely stunning. I mean, it's pretty now. And it's going to get even prettier as the season goes on. I'm going to have to make some decisions here. And probably not too distant.
But you've got some real advantages, because your euphorbia over here is going to come on strong through the summertime. And the osteospermum, it's going to have a little quiet period right at the peak of the summer heat. However, over here, the colibricola is going to kick in and give us a really nice show during the heat of the summer. Then in the fall, you're going to have both of them going.
Right.
So really a nice show. And the Dusty Miller, it'll wind its way through there and be there all the time. So you've got a little trimming to do as you deadhead this flower here.
Yeah.
But over the summer, a lot of enjoyment packed into this container.
And a lot of different things going on, but just a different way of kind of doing it. I guess I'm going to go put this on the sales floor. So this one might sell pretty quick. Eddie's, we're gonna let him take home.
Yeah, got to go grow that for a little
grow it
while.
out a little bit. I've got that retail mind thinking. I think sometimes going. Eddie, I can't thank you enough for this. It's been so much fun.
Been a lot of fun.
It's just an amazing time. Let's go through real quick. I know we've been talking for a while, but let's just see if we've got any questions before we kind of wrap this up. Faye made a very nice comment. Mr. Anderson, you truly are a gift. You have a gift. Thank you for sharing it with us. So very nice.
My pleasure. Always my pleasure.
Yeah. Let's see. We answered a couple other questions. Looks like we were having some help. Let's see. I think we're good. Mr. Anderson, you're a wealth of info. I think everybody's just saying thank you. So if you don't have a place to shelter outdoor pots or can't bring them in due to pets, is a small temporary greenhouse sufficient to protect them?
Yeah, in the shade. You don't want a clear, so a lot of times for winter protection we use a milk colored plastic that keeps the house cool. And then I think it's the things that you select. You've got to have in mind that I want this to last through the winter. So looking at succulents will do very well that way. My citrus does well. If I can just keep the wind off of it and keep a little heat to it. Yeah. I'd rather they didn't freeze, and that may be a problem that you have, whereas the succulents can take light freezes if you can keep them dry and out of the wind. I would go more to perennials. We didn't talk much about perennials, right. But there are a number of different perennials. I do Rudbeckia and Echinacea, these heucheras or coral bells. There's a wonderful collection. And there's one called Southern Charm I absolutely love. It's fabulous. It gets big, bold foliage, and it looks good all summer. It flowers all summer, and then it'll go semi-dormant through the winter time, but by now in the spring it's starting to flush out and look good again. And so I would look more to the perennial side of things. We've talked about several.
Yep, and even the woodies. I mean, even some of the woodies, like the little collectible conifers that we mentioned earlier. I mean, there's a lot of great examples and ideas. So if you can't protect, if you can't bring it in, and the greenhouse is not a bad idea. You still got to think about what plants you're doing. But as always, as I always kind of wrap up everything, because of what Mr. Anderson has created, so thank him again for everything he's done to create McDonald Garden Center the way that it is, that it's been in Hampton Roads for 75 years, and the wealth of knowledge here. I've learned everything either from this man right here or from our great employees.
A lot of folks know a lot of things here.
Yeah, so I mean, if you've got questions, come in and ask us the questions. That's what we're here for. So we definitely want to help plant up your containers this spring and give you advice throughout the entire year. And of course, one last time we'll say happy birthday to Mr. Anderson. I know we've got a lot of great comments for your birthday, so we'll have to put these all together for you and send them to you. But thank you so much, and we appreciate you this week. I appreciate you very much. I appreciate you sitting down. I know the customers do for 2 hours now that we've been going on and on.
Been fun, Mike.
It's been awesome. Fun. It's been so much fun. We're going to go take a rest. We're going to go relax. we're going to call it a day here. But thank you for joining us. We all really appreciate you all tuning in and being customers of our great garden center that Mr. Anderson has created. Thank you all so much. And we hope you all have a great day. Spring is here. We hope we've inspired you, and
let's go plant something.
We'll see you soon. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.